As far as the people that were leading me away, there was no animosity there. They weren't violent with me.
In the field of economics, we apply the term moral hazard to situations in which government subsidy inspires the recipient or recipients to be less vigilant about economic risks than he, she, or they would be in a free market. Such moral hazard inspiring subsidies come in the form of bailouts or promised bailouts, low interest rates, below market government provided insurance, fractional reserve currency creation, and political gifts such as domestic favoring tariffs, quotas, competition-crushing licensing, various forms of taxation on competitors, so-called regulation imposed on competitors, or subsidies or other forms of artificial government glad handling. And this riskier activity leads to wasteful investments of resources and crashes that require liquidation. Everything from the 1991 housing market bubble mess that was inspired by an expansion of the unconstitutional and immoral Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation to the atrophy of the U.S. auto industry prior to the 1980s, thanks to federal tariffs against foreign competition.
Automakers to strike. Bill Plant has the story from Detroit.
After a morning of negotiations and meetings, the Chrysler Corporation was off the hook. President Leonard Woodcock of the UAW selected the strike target with his executive board. The target is the General Motors Corporation. No one now believes that agreement is likely. The biggest stumbling block is the union's demand for a return to unlimited cost of living raises.
And much more can be cited as the results of moral hazards created by the state. But until recently, the economic term wasn't fully applied across what is often perceived as the wider spectrum of human behavior, but which is all part of one whole, human action. Only now, with the accelerated rise of the American police state, of course all states are police states, something to explore later, are some observers recognizing the full and horrifying implications of the word moral in moral hazard as it applies to a society that has accepted the metastasis of the state and its ever-growing thrall over our own lives. A troubling example of this comes in the form of a televised exchange between CNN hostess Allison Camerota and reporter Omar Jimenez, the latter of whom Minnesota State Police arrested live while reporting at the end of May. Upon his release, Jimenez said, quote, "They, the police, weren't violent with me."
So I don't know who was potentially, giving that order in that particular moment. But as far as the people that were leading me away, there was no animosity there. They weren't violent with me.
Which is an early cue to a major perceptual and cognitive problem. Then Camerota offered her concerns over his well-being and said, quote,
"You were doing your job by the book. You presented your credentials. You told them that you were a journalist. You told them that you were with CNN. You told them you were live on the air. I mean, you did them the courtesy of explaining that we were live on the air at that moment. And I'm just wondering, after you and your crew were arrested, at what point did they ever say, sorry, that was a mistake? Or when they released you, was there an explanation of that had all been a big misunderstanding or a mistake and you're allowed to report?
Allowed. This sad example of Stockholm Syndrome opens a mental window to see how vast is the moral hazard that has been created by the very existence of the state and its so-called police power to supposedly protect people from aggression by others. So let's explore a fundamental axiom. The state is not your protector and never can be. It is a collection of people illegitimately claiming the authority to take however much of your property they desire and to threaten you with bodily harm and kidnapping in order to supposedly form the police and so-called justice system that will prevent people from taking your property and freedom and threatening your life. QED. Acceptance of such a system is delusional, willfully so, and therefore greater and greater attacks on life, liberty, and property ownership are inevitable.
for apparently refusing to give police his personal information after a workout inside the Achilles gym.
Back up! Back up!
This man, a gym member, surrounded by a crowd of supporters, was placed in handcuffs and taken into custody by Belmar police.
So it is easy to see how people blind themselves to the inherently aggressive nature of the state, even as they turned a blind eye to their own natural rights. And as time passes, as the dinosaur pop media write hagiographies of statist despots, mass murderers, thieves, and liars, as the government-run edu-indoctrination system pulverizes real history and breaks the links we should have to our ancestral common law heritage, this acceptance of the state as mythical protector leads to an ever-increasing policing of our lives, even as the states and federal government tax and borrow, print money, and destroy our earnings and those of our progeny. And this leads to very troubling conclusions about what the police state might do on the local level should people try to resist the fundamental evil of the state itself. Alison Camerata is so indoctrinated by the moral hazard of giving up one's rights, she used permission rather than right when she addressed the reporter. Permission rather than right to be there, presupposing that there is no right to report, speak, or stand in an area for which tax cash was already taken. Today, many Americans believe the government will take care of their financial and physical security, which leads to the moral hazard of many not preparing for their own well-being. That much is clear. But there's another aspect to the wider scope of the moral hazard created when people believe the government will take care of their physical security, and it comes by way of imagination to reach a stark realization. People often imagine totalitarianism or another form of despotism coming from outside. Films depict invasions or terrorists or federal troops busting down a door. But the way the U.S. fiat currency, central government handout to states and local governments system has developed, one can see that the central government authoritarians have successfully tied local and state police to their money machine. They have made it such that local police, dependent on the money printing handout machine of D.C. and their various state gangs, will be answerable to D.C. for huge chunks of their finances. Already, we've seen states acquiesce to D.C. on issues such as Real ID and conforming to Title IX mandates because the feds will withhold highway and education grants and other pork handouts that were never in any way part of the original intent of the founders, which means it will be much more difficult for local and regional police to not follow orders when those orders tell them to crush even more civil liberties, per the designs of federal and state overlords who hold their paychecks in their hands. And American civilians like Alison Camerata will be their cheerleaders, often ready to kowtow to them and never recognizing the lineage of liberty they have forsaken, the heresy they embrace. If some group ever tries to rebel, don't trust the local cops to be your friends. The state started as your enemy, pretending to protect you even as it robs, and it has planted in your midst the invasion force that the central authorities would have had trouble marching across the plains to attack you. As the fairly bad film Poltergeist made famous, one must remember the phrase, "They're here," and know it is true for both the predators and the willing prey. Be aware, teach, and prepare. If you like this video, please subscribe, hit like, and tell your friends about what we're doing at The Liberty Conspiracy. We'd love to get more subscribers. Find me at Guard Goldsmith on Twitter, find us at Liberty Conspiracy on BitChute, and join our Liberty Conspiracy Facebook group. Be seeing you.